UBU's largest democratic event, and it is fantastic to see so many of you here. My name is Anson Rooms, and I'm the elected chair of Student Council. I'll now hand over the chair to Jonathan Felix, the chair of the UBU Board of Trustees, who will be chairing the general meeting.
Welcome to this part of the meeting, which is the general meeting of the company, which the Board of Trustees have called to vote on a special resolution to amend UBU's Articles of Association. Currently, the articles state that UBU must have 6 sabbatical officers, meaning our full-time officers, and it sets out their specific titles. The proposed special resolution will remove that level of detail from the articles. This is so that you can determine which office you want rather than be bound by the articles themselves. The full details of that are in page 7, I think, of your booklet. Now, I regret that we've had a count and the quorum for the general meeting segment of this session has not been reached. So unfortunately this general meeting is not quorate, so we are unable to vote on this special resolution today. However, the general meeting is adjourned until next week at 5:15, Thursday the 13th of February, that is to say, same time, same place, next week. And at that meeting, members will be asked to vote on the special resolution to amend the UBU Articles of Association.
We're now going to go on to the vote of the elected officer role changes. The current full-time officers will do a 10-minute presentation outlining their proposal.
Student living officer. So like I said, 2 things that came really strongly in the consultation was cost of living and housing. We've all been there, we've all heard horror stories of ourselves or our friends struggling to fight with landlords, and that's something that we really want to pick up on. This officer role will have real strategic oversight and lead of the UBU lettings agency, and as that grows and we start to have a stronger, larger stake in the Bristol market, we'll really be able to influence what happens there. So that's quite exciting. Communities that we link to will be sort of JCRs, and also kind of calls reps and just kind of really strengthening those here.
Next up, we have opportunities in student development. A lot of you will know that the activities in sport and health officer roles in the past have been really restricted by the amount of administration they're expected to do. The UBU is in a better place now, and we no longer think that's acceptable. We think that students deserve a professional service of administration. I don't think we should accept democratically electing untrained administrators anymore.
Following on from that, equality, liberation and access officer. So the aim of this role is to be breaking down barriers. All students, before they get to Bristol University and during them, face different kind of barriers. So this officer is involved in widening participation, so that will be sitting on the university recruitment committee, making sure that who's in the university is diverse and inclusive, and also working on equality policy and objectives for both the union and university, and it's linked to cultural groups, safe groups and liberation campaigns, so that's disabled students, LGBT+ students, black and minority ethnic students and women students.
We've got the Union Affairs and Campaigns Officer. This role the most closely resembles what the President used to do, but we found the title President really misrepresented what the role actually entailed. Even Rob, who's totally awesome, came into the role and did not know that democracy was in his remit.
Is academic experience officer. This is principally an undergraduate focused role. It will be much more closely linked with students who are in academic societies as well as our undergraduate course and Senate reps.
Thank you. And the reason this officer is focused on undergraduate is because we really want to introduce the exciting new role of postgraduate officer.
Okay, this motion does not pass. Okay, so press 1 to vote for keeping the affiliations, 2 for against, and 3 to abstain. Voting is now open. This motion passes. Please keep our affiliation. And these motions will now resume. Okay, we'll now move on to the items submitted by students. First up is a short session about the changes to the academic year structure. Would Jane please come up to the podium?
Hello everyone, my name is Jane Hesling. I'm currently in my 3rd year of course studying physics, chem sci and I'm here because I have some concerns about the current structure of terms and revision and exam periods that have now been made widespread across the university and departments. Although I agree that the 12-week term does work well, because it means we actually finish all of our modules before we're examined on them, which is helpful. I do not agree that we are expected to sit around 50% of our exams in January after only a 3-week Christmas period for revision over a 2-week exam period in comparison to the summer exams where you have the 3-week Easter, an extra week of revision and then 3 to 4 weeks of exam period. So what I think should actually be done is that the university should give more control back to the individual department and school who might have a better idea of how they assess their students. Physics are not assessed in the same way. And I think it's ridiculous that they think, shocking isn't it? I think it's ridiculous that they think that they can have this kind of universal structure across the board. And actually what really concerns me is the effect that this has on students. You're expected to go from a long 12-week term straight into the Christmas break, which you have to spend pretty much all of it revising. If you feel you can have Christmas day off. Straight into an exam period and then straight back into the term to repeat the process. And quite a lot of students will work over the summer. They'll either work in paid employment, or they will do a project at the university, which I often do, or an internship. So there's no time to rest. There's no time to recuperate. And university is hard. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You're going to be spending most evenings and weekends studying or doing social activities, which they just stood up here and explained how important that is to university student life. So, you have to take this into account. Are any of you unhappy with the current setup? Yeah, that's majority. Happy to know. The next question. Do you think that more control should be handed back to each individual department and school? Majority. Fantastic. And my final question, do you want this taken further? That is brilliant.
So, UBU should support the staff strike because staff deserve fair pay, protect our education, and because in doing so, we can actually help prevent the real value pay cut that staff are experiencing. Repeated pay freezes or below inflation pay increases mean that there's been a real value 30% pay cut since 2008, the most sustained since World War II. At the same time, national vice chancellor pay averages about £250,000 with an average increase of more than £5,000 in 2011/12, which is clearly unfair. Most universities also employ some staff below the living wage and some staff on 0-hour contracts. Now, for the effects on our education, overworked and underpaid staff are more stressed, less enthusiastic, and have less time for students, which is clearly damaging for our education. These gaps are also part of a wider attack on education that will carry on into today's challenge. The harm to education caused by these strikes is insignificant compared to the harm caused by the pay cut. So this is why staff are often put off industrial action because they may feel by management or by the government, or even sometimes by students, that doing so is a self-help action will harm students. But I think it's vital to reject such criticism of the staff action, and this can and should be done by visible student support before and during the strike.
Good evening. So according to a report published on the 11th of November 2013, the UBU newspaper, The Tap, reported that our university does not keep a central record of the number and types of animals killed number and types of animals killed per year at the university, something that basically most of the universities, most of the universities do across the UK.
Across the UK, approximately 1.3 million animals were killed in universities research last year, and much investigative journalism has shown that some research on animals at UK universities is indefensibly cruel and unnecessary. You can take many examples. One of them that's well known is Cardiff University. They raised kittens in the dark with their eyes sewn shut, and there was actually nothing that could show that this had any application to the study of human eye diseases. Although a central database on the number and types of animals killed at the university cannot by itself rule out above described events occurring, or by itself tell us whether these kinds of events are occurring, it is a necessary measure so we can discuss issues of animal welfare at our university and generally across universities in the UK. Moreover, it is yet another aspect of university transparency that needs to be opened up. Animal welfare and institutional transparency on animal welfare are moral issues that we as students should take an interest in ensuring and upholding. For these reasons, I think this motion should be supported.
I'm Miles. I've worked with on animals, on rats at university. I'd say actually Bristol is really good at looking after the animals. It's not like 70s, it's not like Cardiff. Bristol's actually really very good. The reason we don't keep numbers and the reason it's public is because about 5-10 years ago we had bombs, like our lecturers were, had car bombs. They tried to bomb Senate House. Luckily, classic story, they set it for 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. and so it actually went up in the middle of the night, so no one was harmed. But that's why we don't keep the numbers and that's why we don't give them out to the public.
This motion does not pass.
I propose the slightly adapted version of the 2010 Ethical Investment Policy for UBU with 2 minor adaptations to it. So this would deem companies unethical if they, and therefore not going to be invested in, not allowed to be invested in, if they fail to uphold basic human rights, as noted in the UN Convention 1948, produces or invests in the production of armaments or torture equipment, tests on animals purely for cosmetic purposes, or produces tobacco or invests in the tobacco industry. And the 2 adaptations we have proposed are companies which extract in fossil fuels or significantly invest in the fossil fuel industry would also be considered unethical. And the UBU should work towards a 30% investment rate in positive investment. So those are companies which promote human rights, good business ethics, global environment, community investment, etc. I believe that as stakeholders in the uni, because we pay money fees, but also more importantly, because we're members of the institution, we have the choice here to direct policy to create positive change rather than negative change. The university is an important public institution and a member of the UK society, I guess. The union has a responsibility to not invest in negative companies and create positive change. And for that reason, I urge you to support this proposition.
Thank you.
My name is Anson Rooms. I'd just like to say that in the light of the questionable practices of payday lenders, that perhaps you might consider adding them to the list of, if the Church of England could sort of renounce its practice of investing in, perhaps the union should too.
This motion passes. Okay. thank you for everyone who has submitted a motion. Motions that have been passed will be ratified at the next student council, which is on Monday, 17th of February.
So I'm going to talk to you actually not about me, just about our accountability as a group, because obviously we're election officers and we're always trying to expand and develop the ways in which students hold us to account. Oh, don't leave, guys. I feel like the others now. And encourage students to always approach us when issues arise, because ultimately it's not great kind of coming to a meeting and having shout and match. It's much better to approach us beforehand. It gives us a bit more time and makes things more successful. We are mandated obviously by our manifestos, which we set back in March, and also student council to make decisions and campaign students. But we are making things more accessible for you guys, lucky. You can now view our action plans and our active policy online. We've always had active policy on the website, just to reiterate, but we've made the format this year far more accessible for you guys. And our action plans, they've always existed, but they've been more university facing. So this is for you guys to really engage with and see what we're up to. We're going to keep them updated every couple of months or so that at the beginning of each student council we can take questions on our plans. This is the result of a recommendation from the Democratic Standards Committee, so it's kind of how the structure has been successful there. If you don't look into our promises, or don't understand just simply why we made a decision, then please come and chat to us. So, do you want me to give a little win? We're going to be really quick with these because we understand it's the end of AMM. We've had food, had drinks, all lovely, but it doesn't take too long. So we're just going to give kind of a minute update on what we're really proud of from the last 6 months. Really annoying, isn't it? So for me, obviously the sports pass is like a major issue for students. It's always a bit of contention. I've been working away at Simon Hayes, so many meetings, been quite difficult times, but there's been some real improvement which is set for next year. So the sports pass next year, effectively month-by-month payment structures, which are kind of going to be about, it's like 9 installments effectively month by month. The idea is that it's cheaper, it's more flexible. Also for the first time next year, I've been working with some reps from Glencoe and some course reps. Really good result of that new system we have in place at UBU, and it's allowed me to really make some change with a placement pass. So next year there'll be a pass for students on placement, medics, dentists and vets, who will be able to pay one price for using facilities and access club facilities, club times. That's really exciting. I'm going to hand over now to Ellie.
So hello. So a lot of the work that I've done this year has been on housing and residences, particularly people who don't live in university allocated accommodation in their first year. So basically, if you live at home, if you're a local student, that's normally going to be local students living with their parents or mature students that have lived in Bristol, that kind of thing. And it's quite exciting. I've secured funding from the university to pay for someone who will create a support network for these students that don't have a traditional hall community. And also funding to support students who live in like city centre halls, which are generally like a bit more spread out. I was in Unite House, so I feel a bit more distant from the university. So this support will basically work with students like that. So that's really exciting because this has kind of been like a group that's always off the radar because actually it's 2,500 students and that number is growing. So 50% of our undergraduates, don't live in St Bishop or Clifton Hall, but they get left off the radar. I've secured funding from the university to help improve their lives.
Hello, I'm Tom. I'm Vice President of Education. I was going to say Education Officer, but we didn't do that. Hopefully, as you see, I'm not quite as tall as that video made me look, nor my nostrils quite as large. So there's a lot of really exciting and interesting stuff we've done this year. You might have seen in September we launched the new student representation system. There's a lot more work to do on that. We've got some kinks to iron out in the system. We're going to make it better. We're going to listen to feedback from last year. That's the kind of important stuff, but it's kind of the systemic stuff, and I want to make sure we do that right. But actually, it bores me slightly because I think the really interesting stuff is going from knowing who our reps are and working with them to what we do with that. How do we empower them to be involved in decisions in their departments and schools? What information can we give to reps? What new tools have we got at their disposal to make sure that they can do some really interesting stuff? And that's really what's pushing me this year. And also, how do we work with reps and with academic societies? Could those be one thing instead of two? We're in the early stages of building a relationship between my role, the education team and with academic societies, and it's not asking those societies to do things, it's asking what we can do for them. And I think that's, I'm very excited by that. In terms of the rep system, we're in year one, we're in a better place than before. We're much further ahead than other unions who've done the same thing because we've learned from them. But there is a lot more to do. And I really want to make sure that it's done before I go. We're launching a postgraduate students network this term, which I'm really looking forward to seeing. And the first kind of thing within that is going to be a 3-minute thesis competition. We've agreed that with Bristol Doctoral College, and that's exciting as well. I was hoping to have really good news on student financial support at this meeting. So those of you who voted in last year's elections will know that I campaigned on increasing the amount of money that students from the poorest families were able to get. And as of yesterday, I thought I was going to tell you that I expected something good to come on that, but actually I've had some really poor news on that today, which I'll have to communicate to you once a formal decision has been made. But watch this space. Thank you.
I think this has been a really disappointing evening. And I want to talk to you a bit about what I've learned as EP Welfare and Equality in these sort of past 2 years. What I've learned is that we have a massively diverse student body. We've got postgraduates who make up a third of our body. We've got undergraduates, we've got mature students, we've got international students, we've got disabled students, we've got BME students, LGBT plus students, we've got women students, we've got student parents. And I'm disappointed because student parents, our university is not even collecting data at the moment about these students. Mature students have a higher dropout rate because they often don't feel part of the community because they don't fit the stereotype of the 18-year-old student. International students tell me in private that they feel that UK students often treat them rudely and not with respect, but they won't be raising those things actually with representatives, and the university continues to use them as cash cows because frankly, international tuition fees is the only thing they can rise with cap tuition fees for UK students. We've got disabled students, BME, LGBT+, and women students who all face structural barriers in education and society. And all of these students are expected to be represented by a full-time officer who doesn't bear their precise title. So they have to figure out, without having that clear name tag, where they have to go. What we've seen here tonight is sports students taking the students' union and the representation for granted. And I want to be clear, this is not a bad thing at all. Because you see, this is the vision that I have for a students' union. I want all students, I want international students, disabled students, BME students, LGBT, mature students, student parents, students with caring responsibilities to feel entitled to representations by this students' union. And what I want to hear from you really is, how do we get there? Because clearly a format like this tonight, the AMF, is not the forum where this is going to happen. We had no discussion, we had no engagement. I don't know if you, I find it a bit boring, sorry, like we can vote no upon me or whatever. But we clearly have failed to engage a vital part of our student body, and I think we failed because it's a vicious cycle. We haven't been able to prove to them the benefits of representation when they get it, and that's why they don't turn up. But if they turn up and they get representation, then I think it will be a virtuous cycle. So we first need to prove to them the value of representation before they come. But my question is, how can we prove that? And also, I refuse to believe that the reason that PG students haven't shown up in their large numbers is that because they don't care about representation. Like I say, I just think we need to demonstrate the value to them. So, yeah, I really do invite you to tell me, how can we get there? You're here tonight, you're engaged, you hopefully, I don't know about this, but I hope that you see the point in a students' union that represents you. So how do we tell these other students? How do we tell the other students who are not here? Because the students' union should be here for all students and not just a minority of undergraduates and not just a minority of people who engage in certain extracurricular activities. So yeah, please do come and talk to me about this because I feel quite strongly about it and I want to sort of turn this disappointment into something positive. So thank you. In terms of my accountability, we're doing something new this year. All of our action plans are going to be online. All of our active policy is updated in a spreadsheet and I've provided all of the information. So please get in touch with me if you have any questions about stuff where you feel that's my mandate. Thank you. So I was really lucky as a Vice President Activities because we had an additional staff member who joined our team about 2 months ago, which meant I've been released from a lot of my traditionally expected administrative duties, and personally because I believe that officers shouldn't be administrators. I've been working really hard on the things that I promised students last year. I promised 4 things. I promised to deliver a second-term society festival that's happening. It's called UBU Showcase, and I'll be seeing posters everywhere. I promised to make the bus route change to include the Students' Union building. I'm in conversations about that right now. I'm delaying it a bit because the Students' Union building isn't finished and probably won't be finished until Christmas 2015, and I don't want people to get off their bus and arrive at a building site.
I promised to ensure that all society events are seen and heard. In my first month, I helped to change the events listings page, and that's done. And more students are using it now than ever. I'm going to do more work on that to ensure that more students upload their events, and that keeps on happening. And finally, I promised to making space for student societies. So I'm connected to Nottingham. And also, I've been working with the university, and in the next about 2 weeks, we'll be releasing a list of all the spaces in student residences and halls that you can use. But that's flagged really interesting detail. As I was looking down the list of all these hall spaces that activities could use, I saw that most of them didn't have disabled access. So it'd be really awesome if we had more representation for disabled students. Lol. My mum's in a wheelchair, and she wouldn't be able to visit me in Baydock Hall because they have disabled access. Anyway, beside the point, maybe we'll be listening. All right.
Okay, so I've been working a lot on student communications this year, and that's about matching up university's expectation of how students communicate with actually how you do, which is very social, very real time. And actually, if you're interested in this stuff, I would love to talk to you about it, but I'm not going to bore you if I remain when I'm standing between you and ART. Thank you very much for your time. Please check out Master Plan Online. I'd love to chat. It's much interesting in my life. Cheers.
I'd just like to apologise for the swearing, as it's against the safe space. So, thank you. Are there any questions that people would like to put to the officers? No? Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, microphone.
Sorry, I know you'll hate me for this. Thank you for all your efforts, guys, for promoting accessible sport in university in the past. 2 years ago, a motion was passed to Mesh University to ensure pay-to-go accessible swimming pool and ensure that costs were in line with the council. At present, it's far more expensive and students people haven't even going there. Is that policy still being pursued by you guys?
Thank you. So yeah, that policy is still active. I mean, I have ongoing, connotising the sports bars question, I have ongoing conversations with SEH about facility access. And it's really important, I suppose, to get that ongoing club dialogue going, because at the moment we're talking a lot about performance sport categories, what people get from it. Specific to the pool though, I mean, the conversations about pricing at the moment, it's set in relation to how much universities subsidise university sport. So kind of the things I'm working on at the moment around, there's a sports strategy which I'm working on at the moment with SEH, there's kind of, dialogue going with club development, what clubs need, and it's kind of like a broad conversation, rather than saying it needs to be cheaper, which I completely agree with. It is pricey, the pay to go, you know how I stand on that, it's a very important issue for me. I think there is real problems in the accessibility of sport at the moment, which is why I think it's so important to have representation in that area. So I would say that if you want to come speak to me afterwards, that's absolutely fine. It's something that in the next few months, or I'd like to see before I finish, the sports strategy and the evidence base around how important student sport is. The university will take a real notice of how things are underfunded and how actually it's negatively impacting on students. So my investor comes speak to me at the end. So it's a bit roundabout, but because it's like the fact that it's a whole system, it's a whole path that you buy into, and that's how the structure and the model is made up, it has to be taken quite kind of in an overarching way. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Just the policy was quite specific. The motion was quite specific 2 years ago, so check that specifically was impacting.
Well, yeah, sure. How we manage policy, as was mentioned by Esther, is that it lasts for 3 years and then it lapses. That's why we measure on things today. So yeah, it's still active policy. And I mean, it's the idea if you come and chat to me about it, it would be good to kind of get your thoughts and your feelings so that can push up the agenda. Exactly. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Yes, one more, and then we'll finish. Yeah, the green.
I'm Laura Paul. This is a question for kind of all of the full-time officers. What will now happen with the policy and the role reviews that you've come up with? Will that come back up again to be voted on another time? Or what's going to happen with that?
Apparently I'm supposed to make a joke, but I failed to do that. So let's just laugh at me for being incompetent instead. Basically, after an in-court amen, it's conclusive. The standard procedure is for that then to go to student council, and that can be voted. We can vote to ratify that, or we can vote to not ratify that, and that will be up to student council. And it's those who hold those kind of decisions. The AGM is still happening on the special resolution this time next week. I'd say to those people in the room who don't want to do the role review, if you don't want to do the role review, that is absolutely fine, and we have an honest divergence of views. But I'd please urge you to still come to the emergency general meeting next week and vote for the special resolution, because what that does is it takes the roles out of our company constitution, which we like to basically never play with, because that is really annoying to do, as you'll have worked out from tonight, where we would have needed 400 people to do anything with that, and it puts it in democratic control. And it means that meetings like this, and meetings like student council, get to say who represents them. And by passing that resolution, it doesn't mean that you agree with the role review, but it means that you agree that our democratic forums like this and like student council should be able to say what the representative roles are. So I just want to clarify that.
Cool. Just to say that also, having spoken to Jonathan, who is the chair of our trustee board, he said there's actually quite a few options that we will probably look at, especially after what happened in the room, because it was so close, because it wasn't in core AMM. There's two things that we might do. The trustee board may choose to launch an online referendum, which we can do, so that will be cross-campus ballot, anyone can vote online, or we may choose to relaunch this at student council, so elected representatives or their nominees are able to attend, people can observe and comment and whatever, and that'll be that. So I wouldn't say it's completely over. Watch this space.
I'd like to call this meeting to a close for the final announcement with the elected officers and the DSA would like to invite you to join us for a drink in AR2 next door. Thank you very much for coming.